everybody, Prowl here, and today I want to talk to you about something that is one of the things that I spend the most time looking at on my channel. I have the most personal interest in, and I think is one of the most important things in all of Minecraft, and that has to do with parity. I find parity to be so important because when you have multiple versions of the same game that do different things, it's just really confusing for people. You have tens of millions of people that watch content about Minecraft online, and they see things that don't match up with their gameplay experience. And I think that creates a negative experience for the player. On top of that, today specifically, we're going to be talking about some really awful parity changes that Mojang has been making over the years, and several of them very recently, that are affecting players in an even more negative way that can drive players away from the game. And of course, that's not something that I want to see. This is affecting Bedrock players the most by far, but it does negatively impact Java players as well. So while a lot of times these things are Bedrock players losing features that we had, it's also Java Edition players not getting good features given to them that they should have or would like to have. So the big problem here is that it seems like there's no thought going towards parity decisions that are being made. And most of these decisions are honestly, it looks like they're being made from the Java Edition is always right perspective or framing. And that way of making decisions is really just terrible. It's really bad. It's bad for the game. It's bad for the players playing the game. It's just not the right way to do it. There's no other way to say it than it's incorrect to do things that way. So what I want to do here is lay out a handful of the terrible parity decisions that were made for you with some of my thoughts on them. Then most importantly, at the end here, I want to give you what needs to become Mojang's method of deciding all of the parity changes going forward. So I hope some of the developers at Mojang watch this, and even more so, if any of you Mojang developers do watch this, I'd really appreciate it if you pass this up the chain to whoever is making these decisions, or who's in charge of these decisions, or who's in charge of making the processes around making these types of decisions. That way we can get to a better place with the game. I want you to pay attention to the parity changes that I list off here. And then take note of the new parity decision process that I lay out for you guys. And I'm going to give a few examples of how to apply this to parity changes that have already been made, and a parity change that is a really big one that probably should be made in the future. But I'd also ask you to use this process on all of the parity changes that I give you here today, and let me know if this process would change the way that the parity was done. Because I think if you come across it from a very honest perspective and a neutral perspective, you would probably revert all of these or almost all of these. And by the way, I think that you should revert them. It's never too late to make the change back. Anyway, let's jump into the list here. The first one is one that happened a while ago. Waterlogged blocks no longer stay waterlogged when moved by a piston. It worked that way in Java Edition, where if you moved a block that was waterlogged with a piston, it loses its water. The water's gone. On Bedrock Edition, it wasn't that way. You could push a block that was waterlogged and it would stay waterlogged. I used this in a variety of different things, farms and such, and it just really had a lot of really cool gameplay implications for building and for redstone and for farms. So I really hated that this change happened. It definitely took something away from Bedrock Edition that was previously there and usable before. Next, we have horses can no longer fit in boats. This change was made not too long ago. It used to be on Bedrock Edition that you could get a horse in a boat. It would turn him sideways, and then you could take your horse with you over water without any kind of issues. On Bedrock Edition as well, the leads on animals breaks a lot easier and more frequently than it does on Java Edition, where I don't think it really ever breaks. So not only on Bedrock Edition did we lose the ability to transfer horses easily across water in a boat, but we can't really reliably do it with having them on a lead, because we have to keep looking back to make sure they're there and go back and pick them up every so often whenever they fall off the lead. Another one is the Enchanted Golden Apple regen being nerfed. This was done recently too, where the regen rate of the Enchanted Golden Apple got significantly nerfed on Bedrock Edition to match what it was on Java Edition. So there's a couple problems with this. Number one, and maybe the biggest one, is Java Edition's base regeneration is higher than Bedrock Editions. So effectively, this makes the Bedrock Edition Enchanted Golden Apple worse than Java Editions is, because the base regeneration works differently and Bedrock's way of working is lower or worse. On top of that, Enchanted Golden Apple is a rare item and it should probably be super powerful anyways. Next, remove the shovel from the boat recipe. I will die on this hill. Nobody agrees with me on this, by the way, and I understand that. It made sense for the shovel to be part of the boat recipe because that's your ore. I'm going to leave it there. I still craft my shovel every single time I make a boat. Take that for what you will. Another big one. On Bedrock Edition, you used to be able to craft a cobweb down into strings, break a cobweb into strings. So you could use a shear to get your cobweb, and then you could craft that one cobweb down into 9 strings. Java Edition had no such ability to do that, so they removed the crafting recipe from Bedrock Edition. Campfires set mobs on fire. So the way it used to work is on Bedrock Edition, if a mob touched a campfire, they would burn. They would actually catch fire. On Java Edition, they only take damage. They don't actually catch on fire. This was used on many different farms and many different things in Bedrock Edition. It could make it so having a cow die on a campfire would make them have cooked beef. So that's something that we use quite frequently and is something that no longer works. This was a big one. The direction in which you were facing on a map when you were off map was removed. So it used to be on Bedrock Edition, you had a little circle with an arrow beside it that would indicate when you're not on the current map, it would indicate what direction your player is facing, allowing you to move towards where that map is and better understand where you are. On Java Edition, you don't have the directional arrow, you only have the circle. So in an instance where you find a treasure map and you want to travel to that treasure map's location, the average player will now no longer know how to do that on Bedrock Edition because the arrow no longer appears. Are there ways to figure out what direction you're going? Yes, you can figure out what direction is north, south, east, west, and then travel in that direction to try to get your little circle to go that way. But again, that is for a small percentage of players that know that tip or trick and use it. Most players do not know that, and we'll go over that within the process, the parity change decision process a little bit later. Animals no longer make a sound when eating. This is a little one, but it was one that was annoying, at least to me and a lot of other players. It used to be on Bedrock Edition, you feed an animal something, like you feed a cow wheat, it made a chewing sound like the player does. On Java Edition, no sound gets made. And they just removed the sound from Bedrock Edition, so it's no longer there. Zombie spawners no longer spawn zombie villagers. This is in the beta right now. Currently on Bedrock Edition, a zombie spawner has the ability to spawn zombie villagers. On Java Edition, it does not. My understanding is on Java Edition, it used to a long time ago, and that was removed. On Bedrock Edition, this is used for a couple of different things. It is an alternative way to get zombie villagers rather than waiting for them to spawn in the world and trapping them. You could have one spawn from a zombie spawner, and you could capture it that way to convert it to a regular villager. Also, there was an effect where when a zombie spawner spawned a zombie villager, if you had villagers for trading in the area, they would actually get a discount, the temporary discount that you get whenever you cure a zombie villager into a villager. So Bedrock Edition players were making villager trading halls around zombie spawners to get that discount whenever the zombies would spawn it. The zombie villager curing time used to be 2 minutes on Bedrock Edition. On Java Edition, it's random. I don't know what the range is, but there's a range. So they changed that and made it so it's no longer constant 2 minutes on Bedrock Edition, and instead it is now random like it is on Java. The respawn anchor on Bedrock Edition used to be able to be silk touched, and then when you place it back down, it would still have its charges. On Java Edition, when you silk touch it, break it, anything, the charges are lost. They removed that from Bedrock Edition to make it so even if you silk touch the respawn anchor, you lose all of the charges that you've put into it. Bedrock Edition, you used to be able to place a button on a fence. It was a decorative thing that a lot of players would like to do just to give their fences a little bit of variety and to decorate and look kind of cool. On Java Edition, you cannot place buttons on fences. This is specifically not talking about the front face of the fence, but the top of the fence post. So they removed the ability for Bedrock Edition players to place a button on top of their fences. Here's a little known technical one that was made, but one that did have its niche uses. Mangrove roots on Bedrock Edition were a block that a comparator could read through, but it was not a solid block. I don't want to get into the technical details here, but for those that know Redstone, you'll understand what I'm saying. You used to be able to place a mangrove root between a comparator and a storage device. That comparator would be able to read the storage device through the mangrove root, just like solid blocks can be done with now. But the mangrove root wasn't a solid block. It was a transparent block like glass, which glass you cannot read through like you can a solid block. Here's the kicker though. There is another parity difference with mangrove roots. On Bedrock Edition, you cannot waterlog them, and on Java Edition, you can. So they made the parity change that negatively impacted Bedrock players. But at the same time with that block, they did not make the parity change that would positively impact Bedrock players. This happens quite a bit actually, and it's happened a couple times throughout the process of these parity changes that I've already listed. There are some parity changes that happened that I do think made sense, that were a negative impact on Bedrock players. An uncarved pumpkin used to be able to be used to make a snow golem or an iron golem. That's no longer the case. It is now in parity with Java, where you have to shear the pumpkin first. It has been the case where on Java Edition, if a zombie that is on fire hits the player catches on fire. It did not used to be that way on Bedrock Edition, and now it is. They made that change. I thought that change personally made sense, but that was another one I wanted to point out. So anyways, here is the process that I think Mojang should follow when making parity decisions. This will work on any decision that they need to make, and it will lead to the correct decision being made every single time. So when answering these questions, we're going to go in with no original intent to change Bedrock to Java Edition or Java to Bedrock Edition. What we're going to do is we're going to see there's a parity difference here. Which way should we go? Which way is the better way to go? So we're starting from a neutral standpoint in our thinking. What is our original, our being Mojang, what is our original design intent? Or in cases where we don't have an original intent, does one version's way of handling this feature or lack of a feature make more sense for how we think the gameplay of Minecraft should work? To sum that up, what is our original design intent as a development team? Or if there is no intent, which way just kind of makes sense for how we think the game should work? Question number 2, does this parity difference break the game in some way? Or does it harm or have some sort of negative impact on survival gameplay? I'll give a made-up example of that. Let's say on Bedrock Edition, whenever you knocked up a piece of wheat, it gave you a piece of bread. Well, that would make getting bread and getting food, especially in the early game, way too easy. It may break that survival gameplay loop. Number 3, what is the impact to the player in each version if the parity change is made? So on Bedrock Edition, does it have a positive or negative impact on the player? On Java Edition, does it have a positive or negative impact on the player? What is that impact? And even more so, to what degree is that impact? Is it a small impact? Is it not a big deal? Or is it a really big impact on how they play the game or on their world or something like that? Number 4, if applicable, can both versions' mechanics work at the same time? Meaning, is it something where either the horse can go in the boat or it can't? Or is it something where we can have iron golems spawn in the Bedrock way and the Java way? They both can work at the same time. And within that calculation, we'll also think, should it work both ways? And then lastly, are there any other parity differences or changes related to this that should be considered? An example from earlier would be the Enchanted golden apple regeneration nerf on Bedrock Edition. And the other parity difference that exists there is the fact that Bedrock Edition's natural regeneration is lower. So you look for anything that could be related to that parity decision change and then think, okay, along with this parity change, should we also make additional changes to bring the game into proper balance for the change that we make? So the answers for these questions, as you've kind of seen, they may carry different weights. There may be some things that are more important than others based on what the parity change is. So for example, something could have a negative impact on the player, but it have a harmful impact on the survival gameplay loop and be very clearly against the design intent of the game. So despite the fact that the change might negatively impact the player, the right decision could still be to make the change due to the way we answered the other questions. So let me show you an example of this using horses can no longer fit in boats. So number one, what is our original design intent? In this case, let's say our original design intent is we don't think horses should be able to fit into boats because they're too big. We don't want big animals to go into boats because it doesn't make sense based on how big the boat is, and the boat wouldn't be able to carry such a big animal. Number two, does this parity difference break the game in some way, or does it harm survival gameplay in some way? So does it harm survival gameplay that a horse can go into a boat or can't go into a boat? I would say no. It doesn't really hurt the survival gameplay of the game at all. It doesn't affect it. Number three, what is the impact to the player in each version of the game? Okay, so if we remove horses getting into boats on Bedrock Edition, what does it do to Bedrock players? Well, now they can't put a horse in a boat and easily transport it across a big ocean. On the other hand, if we add horses being able to get into boats on Java Edition, does it negatively impact them at all? At least me, I can't think of any negative impact that it would have on the player. And the positive impact would be that if a Java Edition player wanted to, they would be able to put a horse into a boat to capture it or to transport it in some way. Okay, number four, can both versions make the change? No, they can't. The horse can either go in the boat or it can't. And number five, are there other parity differences or changes related that should be considered? In this case, there is. Leads break very easily on Bedrock Edition, and they don't break very easily on Java Edition. So if a player has to take a horse across water on Bedrock Edition, they might lose their horse unless we change the way that leads work. On Java Edition, it doesn't have an impact here. And I'm gonna add one final thing into this, which is, does it make gameplay sense? I guess this could kind of go into number one with design intent, or does it make sense for how we think gameplay in Minecraft should work? In this case, I wanna think about what the player's options are. A player has a horse and a player wants to get across water with the horse. Which makes more sense as far as pure gameplay is concerned? Number one, the player gets the horse in the boat, the player gets in the boat, the horse sits in the back of the boat, and the player rows the boat across the water. Option number two, the player gets in the boat, they attach a lead to the horse, the player is in a boat, the horse is floating in the water, and the horse is being dragged by the lead in the water. In this case, I would say that it would make more sense, even though a horse is pretty big for a boat. It also is kind of weird that you would just drag a horse across water with a lead. Like, I think of both of those. Dragging a horse across water sounds more weird to survival gameplay than the horse just getting in the boat. So what decision do we make here? It was against our original design intent for how horses should work, but it kind of makes more gameplay sense to not drag the horse across the water. It doesn't break the game to make the change. It doesn't hurt survival gameplay in any way to make the change. If we make the change to take it away from Bedrock Edition, it negatively impacts players there. But if we make the change to Java Edition, it positively helps those players. So there is a noticeable player impact. And there are other parity differences in play here. If we make the change to not allow horses in boats on Bedrock Edition, then we also need to make the change so animals stay on leads more consistently, which means we will have to do additional work on the Bedrock Edition side if we make this change. And the end result of this would be, in this particular case, we're just going to make it so horses can go into boats on Java Edition because it helps their player base. It gives them something that they don't currently have. It doesn't negatively impact anything on their side. And it makes gameplay sense to not have to drag your horse across water with a lead. Lastly, I want to use this on a very controversial topic, and one that has not had a parity change, to show that this can work on even the most complex and I guess like controversial topics and parity differences. And that is being able to build on the Nether roof. On Bedrock Edition, you can find ways to get above the bedrock and get on the Nether roof, but there's a height restriction that keeps you from placing blocks up there. On Java Edition, you can break through the bedrock roof. You can also place blocks up there once you get there. What is our original design intent? In this case, we have an original intent. We put bedrock up there, which is an unbreakable block, to keep players from getting up onto the roof. In addition to that, our design intent is for players to have to experience the dangers of the Nether and everything that entails, and getting on the Nether roof does subvert that. Additionally, what makes more sense? Well, there's no terrain generation up there, we do not intend for players to be able to build things and put things up on top of the roof. So it is against gameplay intent, and it does not make sense from a just survival gameplay perspective. Number 2, does this parity difference break the game in some way or harm survival gameplay in some way? Well, it doesn't break the game still functions, but it does harm survival gameplay. The survival gameplay intent of the game is when players go to the Nether to get different things, that they have to travel through the harsh terrain and through the dangerous mobs to get to those things. The player gets rewarded by going through those dangers by getting access to all of the different things that we put in the Nether, things like the netherite template and piglin bartering and all the different blocks that exist in the different biomes. So it does harm survival gameplay to allow players to go up there and build up there. It also has a side impact on farms that are built, because if a farm is built above the Nether roof, it can be done away from other blocks that are spawnable, making it easier to create farms against the design intent of the game. What does it impact to the player? Well, if you allowed Bedrock players to build on the Nether roof, they would get all of those unintended benefits that Java Edition players are getting. On the flip side, if you remove it from Java Edition, not only do you make it harder for Java Edition players going forward, but you also have a negative impact on existing worlds that players have built up and playing in a certain way. Moving on to number 3, can we do this mechanic both ways? No, but I'm going to give you a yes here in a little bit. And then lastly, are there other parity differences at play here? Maybe there are related ones. I don't know what they are, but again, we would go through that process. So we need to make a decision on this change. The player impact negative on Java Edition is quite large, but also how far this goes against the original design intent of the game, and in terms of just making sense for survival gameplay, those are quite large as well. So we have an issue here, a large negative player impact and a feature that goes very largely against the way the game is intended to be played. So what do we do here? In this case, and I would say in very rare cases like this, where you have these competing things against each other at such a large scale, I think what should happen is that by default, building on the Nether roof is not allowed. It would instead become a game rule. So in your world, if you want to enable the ability to build on another roof, you could enable that. It would be under the like a cheats option on Bedrock Edition. I'm not sure if Java Edition works the same. I think it does. It would also be a cheats option on Java Edition. But if the player wants to be able to build on the roof, they can make that change. In addition to that, all existing worlds would just stay the way that they are. So if you have a world on Java Edition where you have already been playing in it and doing stuff in it, by default, that option would be on, since that's the way that it's always been on Java. But if you go to create a new world on Java Edition, by default, that option will be turned off and you cannot build up there. Anyways, I hope all of this made sense. I hope this gets in front of the right people, because these parity changes largely have been very concerning. And honestly, they're hurting Java Edition without Java Edition players even knowing it. And I'm sure there are many other parity changes to come that could negatively impact either side of the fence here. So I would love to see Mojang use these 5 questions to help them decide how it is they're going to handle any and all parity changes in the game going forward. If you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, that's fine. Sound off down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video and the thought process I have behind it, help boost the video by clicking the like button. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like it and other Minecraft content, please subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.